Recently, I know someone who made a quick decision to leave their job, and they did it because they believed God was nudging them or leading them in a different direction. And that was a bold decision for several reasons, really. Firstly, their job was pretty secure, and of course, the job market at the moment is pretty insecure. And secondly, it would have appeared to them that decision to respond to that nudge might have appeared really risky and potentially foolish, both to them and to others. And of course, the option to resist the nudge would have appeared safe and seemingly wise, perhaps, to them and to others. And whilst we don't want to embrace foolishness, neither do we want to miss God or his leading in our lives. And several times in my life, I have felt a nudge to step out and take a risk in believing that there is a nudge there from God. And in those moments, I've always been encouraged by a short observation that James makes about the life of Abraham in the letter of James chapter 2, where he says, by his actions, Abraham's faith was made complete. So some have called those moments faith without hesitation. I have tended to use a term over the years, foolish obedience, because there are points in our life following Jesus Christ where we will receive a promise, a prompting, a nudge, an opportunity that will require some level of obedience, maybe even immediate obedience. And on the face of it, that will appear too risky or even foolishness, both to us and to others. Now, I'm not saying there aren't times in those moments when we need wise counsel, and sometimes, though, it will just require obedience, obedience that appears foolish, both to us and to others. I'm not saying it won't go wrong or that you won't look stupid. After all, some of those nudgings, leadings, etc. could just be too much caffeine or too much cheese late at night for us. But in following the Lord, it's my experience over these past decades that there are moments when we will need to place obedience before reputation, before risk, and even reason itself. And I think we see this example in the scriptures in the life of Abraham, Ananias, Paul, and even Christ himself. We see one such example in the account on that first Christmas. See, I find it a marvel and a mystery that God would reveal or make the first announcement of the birth of his son, this pivot of all of history. He'd make it on a cold mountainside to some shepherds who would really, in many respects, be some of the lowest and poorest members of society at that time. And in that moment, I think these shepherds experience one such leading or nudge or opportunity in this divine encounter that they have. Now, we might think that was easy for them to respond to. After all, we know the end from the beginning, but I'm not so sure. You see, they could have stayed safely on the mountain and been wise in their own eyes and in the eyes of other people. That would have been understandable and sensible. However, what they did in response is they took the route of obedience and risk. Because upon hearing the message, the Bible says they left the mountain. In fact, the Bible says they hurried from the mountain. They risked their livelihood, their reputation, on the basis that God was real, he had spoken, and was now revealed. And the world would have been poorer if they'd not foolishly obeyed. After all, we would not have the carol while shepherds watched their flocks by night. In addition, we would have had less characters in the nativity, and more primary school children will have been disappointed as they compete for the fewer roles of just the kings. But we would have lost more than that. You see, we would have lost a central message from that first Christmas, from the birth of Christ. A message that the Bible says was recorded by Mary in her heart, but it was also treasured in the hearts of many, many other people ever since. And it was the message that in the birth of Jesus Christ, there was good news of great joy for all people. And of course, the shepherds themselves would have lost more as well. They would have lost the opportunity to play a key part in a far bigger, far better story for their lives. And so my experience and my reading of the scriptures leads me to agree with that observation, that whilst I don't want to embrace foolishness, neither do I want to miss God or his leading in my life. And that sometimes, in order to do that, in order to have that obedience to God or that faith in him without hesitation, it will look simply foolish to both myself and others. But by doing so, by responding in such a manner, it is also possible that, like Abraham and like those shepherds at that first Christmas, And like many other followers of Jesus Christ ever since, I will discover in that moment of faith without hesitation, in foolish obedience, I will discover that by my actions, my faith is made complete.